Stop. That pill is not medicine. The warning cut across the marble dining room just as Damien Moretti lifted a crystal glass to his lips. 12 men in tailored suits turned toward the far end of the table, where Elena Morales stood beside a silver serving cart in a plain black maid's uniform. No one moved. Even the soft jazz drifting from the hidden speakers seemed to disappear beneath the sudden weight of her words. Damien lowered the glass by half an inch. His gray eyes settled on her with the cold precision of a locked door. Explain yourself. Elena's fingers tightened around the linen napkin in her hand, but she forced her shoulders back. 20 seconds earlier, the most feared man in Chicago had looked perfectly composed. Then he had swallowed one small white tablet, taken a sip of water, and tried to eat a slice of roasted beef. His face had lost color almost instantly. A sharp breath had caught behind his teeth. His right hand now pressed against his stomach beneath the edge of the table. Dr. Victor Hale stepped forward, adjusting the silver cuff of his shirt. Mr. Moretti has experienced these episodes for months. Stress aggravates his condition. The staff should remain silent and allow me to handle it. Elena glanced at the pill bottle near Damien's plate. Then why does it happen after that medicine? Victor's expression barely changed, but the muscle near his jaw flickered. You were hired to clear dishes. And I cleared the same dishes yesterday. Elena moved closer to the table, ignoring the disapproving stare of Celeste Ward, the head housekeeper. He ate 3 bites of soup before taking the pill. Nothing happened. He swallowed the tablet, drank the water, and the pain started in less than a minute. Marco Moretti leaned back in his chair, amusement curling across his face. The new maid believes she has solved what 6 specialists could not. A few men exchanged restrained smiles. Elena felt the familiar heat of judgment creep across her cheeks, the same kind she had endured in restaurant kitchens, classrooms, and interviews where people studied her body before hearing her voice. She did not look away. Damien's breathing grew shallower. The polished knife beside his plate trembled against the china as his hand tightened. Elena reached the table and pulled the water glass away from him. 3 security men shifted at once. Damien lifted 2 fingers, stopping them without taking his eyes off her. You have 5 seconds to convince me that touching my glass was wise. Elena raised it toward the chandelier. A thin, cloudy ring clung to the bottom. She brought it near her nose, catching the sharp cover of peppermint and something faintly bitter beneath it. Her pulse jumped. Did the tablet dissolve before you swallowed it? Damien's brow tightened. Partly. And the pain always feels worse after dinner than breakfast. His stare sharpened. Yes. Victor stepped between them, one palm opening toward the door. This is inappropriate. Remove her. Elena slipped the pill bottle from beside the plate before Celeste could reach her. If this were only stress, the timing would vary. It does not. If the food were the problem, every meal would make him sick. It does not. The only constant is this bottle and whoever brings it to him. The room changed. The quiet no longer belonged to Damien. It belonged to the possibility she had placed in the center of the table. Marco's smile vanished. Celeste lowered her gaze. Victor's hand stopped halfway to the bottle. Damien noticed. So did Elena. His voice came softer now, which made every man at the table sit straighter. Who gave me tonight's dose? Victor adjusted his cuff again. I prepared it personally, as always. Elena looked at the faint residue on her fingertip, then at the untouched food cooling on Damien's plate. Do not eat another bite. Do not take another pill. And do not let anyone remove this glass. Damien studied her for a long moment, pain tightening his features, but not weakening the authority behind them. What is your name? Elena Morales. He turned his attention to the men surrounding the table. Lock the medicine cabinet. Seal the kitchen inventory. No one leaves this house until I know what happened. Victor's eyes hardened. You are trusting a maid over your physician? Damien leaned back slowly, one hand still pressed beneath his ribs. I am. Trusting the only person in this room who noticed the pattern. Elena placed the bottle beside the glass, careful not to disturb the residue. You have not lost the ability to eat, Mr. Moretti. His gaze held hers as the meaning settled over the room. Elena lowered her voice. Someone has been teaching your body to fear food. 3 weeks earlier, Elena Morales had entered the Moretti estate through the service entrance with 1 suitcase, 2 pairs of sensible shoes, and a promise to herself that this job would be temporary. The house stood behind iron gates on the northern edge of Chicago, all limestone walls, black windows, and silence that felt more expensive than anything she owned. Celeste Ward met her in the staff corridor, dressed in charcoal gray with a silver key ring at her waist. Her gaze traveled over Elena's broad frame, paused at the buttons of her uniform, and cooled another degree. The agency should have sent the correct size. Elena smoothed the black fabric across her hips. This is the largest one they provided. Celeste turned toward the staircase without apology. Then do not stand where guests need to pass. The rules came quickly as Elena followed her through the lower floor. She was not to speak to Damien Moretti unless addressed. She was not to enter the private dining room after 10 o'clock. She was never to ask why certain doors remained locked. Most importantly, she was not to interfere with the kitchen. Chef Laurent has served this family for 11 years. Celeste stopped beside a swinging door. You will wash, carry, polish, and remain unnoticed. Elena lifted one eyebrow. Remaining unnoticed is one of my strongest professional skills. Celeste did not smile. The kitchen beyond the door was bright, immaculate, and ruled by a thin man with silver hair and the patience of a snapped wire. Laurent handed Elena a stack of copper pans without asking her name. Scrub these again. She examined the spotless surface. They are already clean. His mouth tightened. Then you should finish quickly. By the end of her first week, Elena understood that the house measured people by where they stood. Damien occupied the top floor and the head of the table. His advisors filled the library. Celeste controlled the corridors. Laurent commanded the kitchen. Elena belonged near the sink, where conversations passed over her as if she were another piece of furniture. That suited her until she began noticing the trays. Every evening, Damien's dinner returned nearly untouched. Roasted salmon, filet mignon, handmade pasta, herb chicken, all of it came back cold. Sometimes only the water glass had been emptied. Other nights, the white tablet beside his plate was gone, but the food remained exactly where Laurent had placed it. Elena started keeping track on the back of discarded inventory slips. Monday, 2 bites of rice, no meat. Tuesday, half a cup of broth. Wednesday, nothing after the medication arrived. Thursday, 3 spoonfuls of soup before Dr. Victor Hale entered the dining room. She did not need a medical degree to recognize a pattern. She had learned to watch food long before she learned to cook it. Her grandmother had run a small lunch counter in Pilsen, where flavor mattered, but so did knowing which customer could not tolerate dairy, which child needed more iron, and which exhausted factory worker had not eaten since dawn. Elena had once planned to build on those lessons at culinary school. Then her former fiancé had stood in their apartment kitchen, looked at her textbooks, and laughed. People will take nutrition advice from you. The memory still returned at inconvenient moments. She had left the program 2 months later and told everyone money was the reason. At the Moretti estate, she buried that old dream beneath dishwater and silence. Still, she watched. Damien tolerated thin soups better than heavy meals. He became ill more often after Victor's visits. On nights when the doctor did not appear, a little more food disappeared. Then, during a storm that left half the kitchen staff stranded across the city, Laurent shoved a pot toward Elena. Make something simple. The boss will not eat it anyway. She prepared chicken broth with ginger, soft rice, carrots, and a small amount of lemon. No cream, no wine, no rich stock. She sent it upstairs and expected the usual untouched return. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the tray came back. The bowl was empty. Elena stood alone beneath the kitchen lights, staring at the clean porcelain as if it had spoken. Behind her, the swinging door opened. Damien Moretti stepped into the room, carrying the bowl in one hand. His dark suit jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled neatly to his forearms, and exhaustion had sharpened every line of his face. He placed the empty dish on the steel counter between them. You made this? Elena looked from the empty bowl to Damien's unreadable face. I did. He rested one hand on the steel counter, his posture controlled despite the fatigue beneath his eyes. Chef Laurent claims the broth was his. Elena folded the dish towel in her hands. Chef Laurent was busy telling everyone I was too slow to peel carrots. A faint shift touched Damien's mouth, not quite amusement. Make it again. She glanced toward the clock above the pantry door. It is 2 in the morning. His gaze did not move. I am aware. Then you are also aware that good broth takes time. Damien stepped closer, not threatening, simply impossible to ignore. You fed me something I could keep down. I want to know why. Elena studied him for a moment. Up close, the signs were clearer. His skin looked pale beneath the warm kitchen lights. His shoulders were rigid, as if discomfort had become a habit. A glass of water stood untouched near the sink, and his right hand pressed briefly against his side before dropping again. I will cook, she decided. But first I need answers. One dark eyebrow lifted. You are giving me conditions in my own house. I am asking questions in a kitchen. She pulled a notebook from the pocket of her apron. What medication do you take before meals? His expression closed. That is private. Then your stomach can remain private too. Elena turned toward the refrigerator. You came downstairs because something worked. If you want me to repeat it, I need more than an order. Silence stretched between them. Damien was accustomed to fear, obedience, and people rushing to fill every pause. Elena did none of those things. At last, he drew a small white bottle from his pocket and placed it on the counter. One tablet before breakfast and dinner. She did not touch it. Who prescribed it? Dr. Hale. When did the nausea begin? About 6 months ago. Before or after the pills? His jaw tightened. After. Elena wrote it down. Any allergies? None. Do rich foods make it worse? Usually. Coffee. Sometimes. Alcohol. His eyes narrowed. You are very comfortable questioning me. She opened the refrigerator and removed ginger, carrots, and a covered container of cooked rice. You are very comfortable avoiding answers. Damien watched her rinse the vegetables. I do not avoid anything. Elena reached for a knife. You have avoided dinner for half a year. That silenced him. She worked without rushing, slicing each carrot evenly and warming fresh broth over low heat. Damien remained at the counter rather than returning upstairs. The kitchen felt smaller with him in it, but not because of his size. He carried stillness like authority. Where did you learn this? His attention followed her hands. My grandmother owned a lunch counter on West 26th Street. She believed food should solve a problem before it impressed anyone. And what problem are you solving now? Elena added ginger to the pot. I am trying to learn whether your body rejects food or whether something is teaching it to. His gaze shifted to the pill bottle. For the first time, uncertainty broke through his composure. Dr. Hale believes stress is responsible. Stress does not keep a schedule this precise. She lowered the heat. You finished the soup last night because it was simple, gentle, and served before your medication. Damien crossed his arms. You noticed all of that from return trays? People throw away more truth than they realize. 20 minutes later, Elena set a small bowl before him with 3 spoonfuls of broth, soft rice, and finely shredded chicken. That is all. For now. I am not a child. Then do not argue with the portion. Damien stared at her, then picked up the spoon. The first taste brought no visible reaction. He waited, suspicious of his own body. He took a second, then a third. Elena watched the clock rather than his face. 5 minutes. Passed. Then 10. His breathing remained even. The tension in his shoulders loosened by a fraction. More, he murmured. Elena filled the bowl halfway. He ate slowly, each spoonful measured, until the dish was empty. Nothing happened. No sudden pain. No nausea. No retreat from the table. Damien set the spoon down and looked at Elena as though she had shifted the foundation beneath the house. Name your price. She wiped her hands on the towel. I do not want money. Everyone wants money. Then tonight can be educational for both of us. Elena nodded toward the bottle. I want your food records, every prescription, every change in dosage, and the dates of every episode for the last 6 months. His stare sharpened. Why? Because one successful bowl is luck. A pattern is evidence. Damien reached for his phone, sent a brief message, and placed it face down. 10 minutes later, Celeste entered carrying a thick leather folder. Her expression tightened when Damien pushed it toward Elena. She has access to all of it, he instructed. Celeste's eyes dropped to the empty bowl before returning to Elena. Of course. When the door closed, Elena opened the file. Meal logs, appointment notes, and medication charts filled the pages. She traced each date with her fingertip, comparing symptoms against the handwritten entries. The same signature appeared again and again beside every severe episode. Victor Hale. Elena looked up slowly. This is not random. Damien leaned across the counter. What did you find? She turned the page toward him and tapped the repeated name. Your worst nights all begin with the same man approving your medication. By sunrise, Elena's room had been emptied. Two housekeepers carried her suitcase upstairs while Celeste followed with the expression of someone supervising an evacuation. Elena stood at the foot of the grand staircase, arms folded across her chest. Where are they taking my things? Celeste adjusted the silver keys at her waist. The east corridor. Mr. Moretti's instructions. I did not agree to move. Damien appeared at the landing above them, dressed in a dark suit despite having slept less than 3 hours. You identified a possible threat inside my home. Agreement is no longer the priority. Elena lifted her chin. That sounds like a polite way to describe imprisonment. He descended the stairs without hurry. It is protection. Protection usually comes with a choice. Damien stopped one step above her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion still shadowing his eyes. People who uncover secrets in this house become targets. I will not leave you in the servants' wing with one lock and a window facing the alley. Then improve the lock. Celeste's lips pressed into a thin line. Damien, however, studied Elena as if resistance interested him more than obedience. Your new room is 20 feet from mine. Nico will remain outside the corridor. A guard at my door does not make it less locked. The door opens from the inside. That is a low standard for freedom. For one brief moment, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Then he turned toward Celeste. She receives unrestricted access to the kitchen, pantry records, and medical logs. No ingredient reaches my table without her approval. Celeste's composure finally cracked. Sir, Chef Laurent will object. Chef Laurent may object while following instructions. Elena watched Celeste walk away, the sound of her heels sharper than usual against the marble. You enjoy rearranging people's lives before breakfast. Damien continued toward the dining room. I enjoy staying alive. The new system began within the hour. Elena sealed spice containers with numbered labels, separated fresh deliveries from existing stock, and created a handwritten log for every person entering the kitchen. Red marks identified meat and dairy. Blue marked grains. Green covered produce. White stickers belonged to medication and supplements. Laurent stood near the stove with his arms crossed. This is a kitchen, not a police station. Elena tied back her hair and placed another label across a jar of saffron. Then stop acting like inventory has nothing to confess. He glanced toward Damien, who observed from the doorway. You are allowing a maid to question my staff? Damien's eyes remained on Elena. I am allowing the person who fed me successfully to prevent mistakes. Lawrence's face hardened. My food was never the problem. Then the records will protect you, Elena replied. Unless there is something you do not want recorded. That ended the argument. By noon, she had found 3 broken seals, 2 unlabeled supplement bottles, and a delivery invoice signed by someone who had not worked at the estate in 4 months. None proved sabotage, but each exposed how easily one could occur. Dr. Victor Hale arrived shortly after, carrying his leather case and a smile polished enough to hide resentment. He paused when he saw Elena measuring powdered contents from Damien's medication onto a glass plate. You are contaminating evidence. Elena did not look up. The bottle was already opened. Victor placed his case on the counter. You are not trained to interpret pharmaceuticals. I am trained to notice when the same patient improves without them. His gaze cooled. You prepared 1 bowl of soup. That does not make you a physician. Elena capped the sample vial. And a medical degree does not make every conclusion correct. Damien stepped between them before the silence turned poisonous. No one dismisses her observations. Not even you. Victor's eyes moved to him. This woman is encouraging paranoia. Paranoia kept my family alive. Damien's tone remained quiet. Results will decide who is right. Later, Elena found him alone in the breakfast room, reviewing shipping reports while eating oatmeal she had prepared. He had finished nearly half the bowl. You moved me upstairs without permission, she reminded him. You questioned my doctor without hesitation. Those are not equal. Damien set down the spoon. No, one of them may save my life. Elena rested both hands on the back of a chair. I will help you, but you do not own my time, my movements, or my choices. Something changed in his expression, a brief recognition rather than irritation. What do you require? No locked doors, no guard following me inside the kitchen, and no decisions about my life made in rooms where I am not present. He considered each condition. The guard remains outside. Outside the corridor, not outside my bedroom. Agreed. Elena, not at once. It was not trust, but it was the first boundary he had accepted. That evening, she stored a sealed sample of Damien's dinner in a locked cabinet and recorded the time in her ledger. When she returned before midnight, the brass lock hung open. The shelf inside was empty. In its place lay a folded scrap of paper. Elena unfolded it beneath the pantry light. The message was written in careful black ink. "Remember where maids belong." Elena read the note twice, then folded it into the pocket of her apron instead of calling for help. Whoever had taken the sample wanted fear, and fear was most useful when it changed someone's behavior. She refused to provide that satisfaction. Before dawn, she prepared a second set of records, but this time she kept the real ledger hidden inside an empty flour container beneath the lowest pantry shelf. The visible book contained harmless substitutions. The sealed samples went into 3 different locations. One in the kitchen freezer, one inside the staff refrigerator, and one in a locked metal box beneath Damien's study desk. By breakfast, the kitchen looked unchanged. Only Elena knew it had become a test. Damien entered wearing a black suit and carrying a folder of port reports. His gaze moved over the counters before settling on her face. "You did not sleep." Elena placed a bowl of oatmeal before him. "Neither did the person who opened my cabinet." His hand stopped above the spoon. "Why was I not informed?" "Because whoever left the note may be watching how quickly information reaches you." She removed the folded paper and slid it across the table. Damien read the message without expression. The stillness around him deepened. "Nico will question every member of staff." Elena shook her head. "Not yet." His eyes narrowed. "Someone entered a secured pantry. And now that person believes I am frightened and careless." She placed a small white tablet beside his bowl. "I want them confident." Damien looked at the pill, then at her. "What did you change?" "Nothing they will notice." He leaned back slightly. "That is not an answer. It is the answer you receive until I know who listens outside doors." For several seconds, he simply watched her. Then he picked up the spoon. "You are becoming comfortable giving orders." Elena pushed the oatmeal closer. "Eat before it gets cold." The next 4 days followed a controlled routine. She adjusted the amounts of protein, fat, and spice in Damien's meals while removing every supplement not independently verified. His appetite improved. The color returned to his face. He slept longer than 3 hours. More importantly, the severe episodes stopped. Elena recorded every change and compared it with Victor Hale's visits. On the 5th evening, the family council gathered for dinner. Marco Moretti arrived early, wearing a navy suit and a patient smile that never reached his eyes. Victor stood near the fireplace with a glass of mineral water, speaking quietly to Celeste. Laurent arranged plates beneath polished silver domes while Elena checked each serving herself. Marco watched her pass behind Damien's chair. The household has become very modern. Maids now supervise physicians. Elena lifted one lid, inspected the dish, and replaced it. Only when physicians overlook obvious patterns. Victor's mouth tightened. "Improvement does not prove wrongdoing." "No," Elena answered. "But consistency creates questions." Marco rested his elbows on the table. "And what qualifies you to ask them?" Before Elena could respond, Damien set down his napkin. "She is qualified by results." The room quieted. He drew the plate toward himself and cut into the roasted chicken Elena had prepared. Every face turned toward him. He ate one bite, then another. No hesitation. No pain. No hand pressing beneath the table. Marco's smile thinned. Victor glanced toward the water glass. Damien noticed. "Is something wrong, doctor?" Victor adjusted his cuff. "I am surprised you are ignoring medical advice." Damien took a third bite. "For 6 months, your advice left me unable to finish dinner." His gaze shifted toward Elena. "Her method has done more in 5 days than yours did in half a year." Laurent looked down. Celeste's fingers tightened around her key ring. Marco's voice turned light again. "Surely this does not require elevating a servant above the household." Damien placed his fork beside the plate. "Elena Morales has authority over every item that enters this kitchen. Anyone who interferes with her work answers to me." Elena felt every eye in the room move toward her. This was protection, but it was also a declaration made in a world where declarations created enemies. She met Marco's stare without lowering her own. Victor reached for the pill bottle near Damien's place setting. Elena moved first. "Not that one." His hand stopped. She replaced it with an identical bottle from her apron. "You changed the medication?" The question came too quickly. Too sharply. Elena kept her expression calm. I changed the container. Victor's eyes flicked toward the original bottle. For one revealing instant, panic broke through his composure. Damien saw it. So did Marco. Elena closed her fingers around the old bottle. Interesting, she murmured. Victor drew back. What is? You knew which bottle mattered before anyone told you it had been switched. The silence at the table became absolute. Later that night, Nico brought Elena the security footage from the medicine corridor. The screen showed Victor approaching the locked storage room at 12:14 in the morning. He did not force the door. He did not use a key. The door opened from the inside. Celeste stepped into view, glanced both ways, and let him enter. The security footage played 3 times before Damien looked away from the screen. Celeste's face had been clear. Victor's hand had disappeared beneath his coat as he entered the storage room. Nico stood beside the desk, waiting for an order, but Elena focused on the timestamp in the corner. 12:14 in the morning, 10 minutes after she had placed the false bottle inside. They knew where to look, she murmured. Damien's fingers rested against the edge of the desk. Celeste has served this family for 18 years. Elena kept her eyes on the frozen image. Long service does not erase opportunity. His expression tightened, not with anger, but with the weight of betrayal. You believe she is working with Victor? I believe she opened the door. I do not know why. Nico shifted his stance. I can bring her in now. Elena turned toward him. No. If Celeste is afraid, she may still lead us to whoever controls her. Damien studied Elena in silence. And if she is not afraid, then she is more dangerous than she appears. Before he could answer, a sharp knock came from the hallway. Laurent entered without waiting, his face drained of color. Mr. Moretti, something is wrong in the breakfast room. They found Damien's place already set. A bowl of broth sat beside fresh bread, exactly as Elena had prepared it 20 minutes earlier. She stopped several feet from the table. Do not touch anything. Victor appeared in the doorway behind them, carrying his leather case. This constant suspicion is becoming irrational. Elena moved closer to the bowl and noticed a faint film across the surface. She had covered the broth before leaving the kitchen. Someone had lifted the lid. Who brought this upstairs? Laurent looked toward Celeste, one of the junior staff. Celeste stood near the curtains, her hands clasped tightly at her waist. I supervised the tray myself. Damien's gaze moved to her. Did you? Her eyes lowered. Yes. Elena reached for the small testing strips she had begun carrying in her apron. She dipped one into the liquid. The color shifted almost immediately. Victor stepped forward. Those strips are unreliable. Then you should not be worried. Elena placed the strip on a saucer. No one eats until this is tested properly. Damien's attention remained fixed on Celeste. Leave us. Celeste looked toward Victor for less than a second. It was enough. Nico escorted her into the corridor. Victor opened his case. Mr. Moretti, you have missed 2 doses. Your symptoms may return. Elena blocked his path to the table. He will not take anything from that case. Victor's smile vanished. You are not in charge of his medical care. Damien pulled out a chair and sat without touching the food. Today she is. The words landed harder than any raised voice. Victor closed the case. Then I hope you are prepared for the consequences. He walked out with measured steps, but his shoulders remained rigid. Elena replaced the contaminated broth with a sealed portion from the kitchen freezer. Damien ate slowly while Nico reviewed staff movements. For nearly 15 minutes, nothing happened. Then Damien's spoon slipped from his hand. His face lost color. A cold sheen appeared across his forehead. Elena reached him before the others understood. Look at me. His breath shortened. The broth was sealed. This is not from the broth. She moved behind his chair and checked the side of his neck. Beneath the edge of his collar, a tiny red mark stood out against his skin. Her stomach dropped. Someone injected you before breakfast. Damien's hand closed around her wrist, not hard, only enough to steady himself. Who? Elena looked toward the open doorway. Victor was gone. Celeste was gone. Nico ordered the estate sealed. Within minutes, the household filled with controlled panic. Victor returned claiming Damien needed an emergency antidote, but Elena refused to let him near. You do not know what he was given, Victor snapped. Neither do you, Elena countered. Unless you already know what is in that syringe. Nico found a small vial hidden in the service hall. Victor pointed at Elena before anyone could examine it. Her fingerprints will be on it. She has handled every container in this house. Marco arrived as if summoned by the accusation. Bank records appeared on a tablet showing a large transfer to Elena's younger brother. Messages followed, supposedly sent from her phone to a rival family. The evidence was too complete, too neat, and far too fast. Marco leaned toward Damien. She gained your trust, controlled your meals, and isolated you from your doctor. What more do you need? Damien's face remained pale, but his eyes found Elena across the room. Nico, take her to the secure room. The words struck harder than she expected. You believe them? His jaw tightened. I believe someone wants you exposed. Then stand beside me, not between me and the door. Nico guided her away while Victor prepared another syringe. The secure room closed with a heavy click. Elena paced once, then forced herself to replay every symptom. Damien had weakened too quickly. The injection mark was fresh. The contaminated broth had been a distraction. Through the reinforced glass, she saw Victor enter Damien's room alone and remove a second vial from his case. Elena rushed to the window and slammed her palm against it. Do not let him use that. The person who poisoned Damien is still in the room. Elena struck the glass again, but Nico was already moving. He crossed the corridor, entered Damien's room, and caught Victor's wrist before the syringe reached Damien's arm. Victor's calm cracked. Move aside. He needs this now. Nico tightened his grip just enough to stop the motion. Then tell me what is inside. Victor pulled back. An emergency counteragent. Elena pointed through the reinforced window. That is not an answer. Damien lay pale against the pillows, his breathing shallow but steady enough to buy a little time. Nico looked toward Elena, then toward the keypad beside the secure room. If I open this door and you are wrong, I lose more than my job. Elena pressed both palms against the glass. If you keep it locked and I am right, he may not survive the hour. Nico hesitated only once before entering the code. The lock released. Elena rushed past him and reached Damien's bedside. She checked his pulse, studied the injection mark near his collar, then looked at the vial in Victor's hand. What was he given? Victor's expression hardened. You are wasting time. So are you. Elena pulled open his medical case and found 3 unlabeled ampoules beneath the padded lining. No physician carries unmarked medication into a private home. Victor stepped toward the case, but Nico blocked him. Elena examined Damien's pupils, then the color of his lips and the slight tremor in his fingers. Her mind moved through every possibility she had learned from food safety courses, emergency training, and years of caring for relatives who could not afford specialists. He needs charcoal, fluids, and monitoring until we know what entered his system. Victor let out a sharp breath. Activated charcoal will not reverse an injection. No, but it may help with anything already in his stomach, and it buys us time while a real toxicology team tests the vial. Damien's eyes opened slightly. His voice came rough and quiet. Do it. Victor turned toward him. You are trusting kitchen training over medicine. Damien's gaze settled on Elena. I am trusting the person who has been right. That was enough. Nico called the independent medical team Damien kept for emergencies outside Victor's control. Elena mixed activated charcoal with water and helped Damien drink slowly. She kept him upright, counted his breaths, and refused to let Victor touch another instrument. Stay with me, she murmured. Damien's eyes remained on hers. You give orders even when locked in a room. You listen better when you are too tired to argue. A faint trace of humor passed through his expression before it disappeared beneath another wave of weakness. Victor moved toward the door. Nico stepped in front of him. You are staying. This is unlawful detention. Then you can explain that after the vial is tested. Elena glanced toward the security monitor on the wall. One camera showed movement near the service elevator. Celeste hurried through the corridor carrying a small leather envelope. Another screen flickered, then went dark. Nico, someone is disabling the system. He reached for his radio. At that exact moment, the estate alarms began to pulse through the hallway. Not loud enough to create chaos, but sharp enough to signal a coordinated breach. Victor used the distraction to reach for his case. Elena shoved the rolling medical cart between them. The wheels struck the doorframe, blocking his path. A humidifier beside the bed released a cloud of steam as she turned it to maximum, obscuring the narrow doorway. Nico secured Victor while the house staff rushed to restore the cameras. Elena returned to Damien and pressed a cool towel against his forehead. Do not close your eyes. His fingers found her wrist, lighter than before. You should leave this house. You tried that argument already. This is no longer about the kitchen. It was never only about the kitchen. The independent medical team arrived minutes later and confirmed that Elena's caution had prevented a dangerous second dose. Damien stabilized under observation, but the crisis outside the room had only begun. Nico entered carrying a tablet, his face set. Marco has called. An emergency council meeting. He claims you are medically unfit to lead. The vote begins in 2 hours. Damien pushed himself higher against the pillows. Who supports him? Enough men to make it close. Elena looked toward the darkened monitor, then at Victor, who had finally lost every trace of confidence. This was always the plan. Make Damien weak. Make him look unstable. Then remove him before the truth could surface. Nico nodded toward the hallway. There is more. Marco has invited the entire council to the main dining room. Damien's eyes narrowed. He wants a public surrender. Elena straightened, her fears settling into something colder and more useful. Then we give him a public answer. Damien reached beneath the bedside drawer, removed a small pistol, and placed it on the table between them without pointing it at anyone. Beside it, he set a brass key and a card marked with the code to his private safe. Take these. The records inside will prove the financial transfers. Elena looked at him. You are giving me access to everything? I am giving it to the person who saw what everyone else missed. She closed her fingers around the key, not the weapon. Then you are coming with me. Damien's jaw tightened. You will leave through the west gate. Elena stepped closer until he had no choice but to meet her eyes. No. This time, we walk into that room together. 2 hours later, the main dining room no longer looked like a place for meals. It looked like a courtroom built from polished oak, crystal, and suspicion. 12 council members sat beneath the chandelier, while Marco Moretti stood at the head of the table, one hand resting on the back of Damien's chair. Leadership cannot depend on a man who cannot stand through dinner, Marco began, his voice calm enough to sound reasonable. This family needs stability. The doors opened before anyone could respond. Elena entered first, carrying a leather folder and a covered silver tray. Damien followed beside Nico, pale but upright, each step deliberate. Every conversation died at once. Marco's fingers tightened against the chair. You should be resting. Damien moved to his place without looking at him. You should be more careful when declaring me finished. Elena placed the folder on the table and removed the tray lid. Inside sat 12 small plates, each prepared differently. One lacked dairy. Another contained no salt. A third had been made without shellfish. Marco glanced at the arrangement and gave a thin smile. Are we postponing the vote for supper? Elena met his eyes. No. I am demonstrating how easily food records reveal what people believe is private. She opened the folder. Every member of this council has a dietary restriction recorded by the household. Every medication, allergy, and preference is available to the people who prepare your meals. That information was used against Damien. Victor sat under guard near the far wall, his medical case sealed on the floor. His face had lost its earlier confidence. Marco waved one hand. A theory from a servant. Damien lowered himself into his chair. Listen before you decide what she is. Elena spread the evidence across the table. 6 months of medication logs. The most severe episodes occurred after doses approved by Dr. Hale. Security footage places him inside the storage room after midnight. Financial records from Damien's private safe show payments routed through 3 shell companies connected to Marco. A murmur moved around the room. Marco did not flinch. Paper can be manufactured. Then let us discuss behavior. Elena turned to Celeste, who stood beside Nico near the doors. The housekeeper's face looked older than it had that morning. Elena placed a small recorder on the table and pressed play. Celeste's voice filled the room, shaking as she admitted Marco had threatened to expose her son's gambling debt unless she opened the medicine room. Marco's composure finally shifted. A frightened employee will say anything. Celeste raised her eyes. You promised no one would be harmed. The council went silent again. Marco looked toward the tray, then back at Elena. And what is this performance supposed to prove? She lifted one plate from the center. This appetizer came from the kitchen after your people entered it. The laboratory found a harmful compound on this serving. Several men pushed their chairs back. Elena did not move. Only one person knew which plate had been altered before the results arrived. She slid it toward Marco. Eat it. His face hardened. Do not be absurd. You claim the evidence was false. Elena's voice remained level. Prove it. Marco stared at the plate, but did not touch the fork. Damien leaned back, watching him with cold patience. You have eaten at this table for 20 years. Why refuse now? Marco's eyes moved toward Victor. That single glance was enough. Nico stepped forward, but Victor suddenly lunged for the sealed case at his feet. The guards closed around him before he reached it. At the same moment, two men near the side entrance tried to cut the lights. Elena moved toward the kitchen doors and pulled the emergency steam release she had prepared earlier. A thick white cloud rolled through the service passage, obscuring the entrance without harming anyone. Confusion spread, but only for seconds. Nico secured the doors. The remaining guards separated Marco's supporters from the council. Victor caught Elena's arm and tried to draw her backward into the steam. She twisted free, struck the fire alarm lever with her elbow, and water burst from the ceiling. The slick floor forced Victor to release his balance. Nico reached him before he could move again. Marco backed toward the wall, his carefully arranged plan dissolving beneath the alarm and falling water. Damien rose slowly from his chair. You weakened me, used my household, and tried to turn my counsel against me. Marco lifted his chin. You would have done the same. Damien's hand moved toward the weapon beneath his jacket, but Elena stepped between them. No, every eye turned to her. She looked at Marco, then at the council members who had nearly voted Damien out. He does not disappear. He answers for what he did in front of everyone he tried to deceive. Damien studied her face. The room waited for his decision. At last, his hand fell away from the weapon. Nico, take them both into custody. Preserve every record. Marco's expression collapsed for the first time. You are letting a maid decide my fate. Damien looked toward Elena, rain from the sprinklers, running from his hair to his collar. No, I am respecting the person who uncovered the truth. After the room cleared, the broken plates and soaked linens were all that remained of Marco's attempted takeover. Damien approached Elena and placed a brass key in her palm. The front gate is open. Your money is ready. No one will stop you. She closed her fingers around the key. His voice lowered. You are free to leave. Elena stood beneath the dripping chandelier with the brass key pressed into her palm. Beyond the tall windows, the first gray light of morning touched the grounds. The front gates were open, exactly as Damien had promised. For the first time since entering the Moretti estate, no guard waited to redirect her, no locked door stood between her and the road, and no one had the authority to order her back into the servants' wing. Damien remained several feet away, pale from the poison and exhaustion, yet unwilling to sit while she made her decision. The driver can take you anywhere in the city, he offered, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Your brother's debt has been cleared. The agency contract is finished. You owe this house nothing. Elena looked down at the key. You arranged all of that before asking what I wanted. His expression tightened. I was giving you options. Options are useful when the person receiving them helps choose them. Damien accepted the correction without defense. Then choose. The simplicity of those words unsettled her more than any command ever had. She walked toward the open doors, each step carrying her past the place where Celeste had once told her not to block the hall, past the staircase where her belongings had been moved without permission, past the service corridor that had taught her how easily people overlooked someone they considered ordinary. Cold morning air reached her face. One more step would place her outside. Elena stopped. Damien did not follow. He did not call her name. He gave her the distance she had demanded, and that mattered. She turned slowly. If I stay, I do not return as a maid. His shoulders eased by the smallest degree. Agreed. She walked back into the foyer. I control food, safety, medication tracking, and household nutrition. Every delivery is logged. Every employee receives proper training. No one is punished for reporting a mistake. Done. The kitchen staff receives fair wages, regular breaks, and uniforms that actually fit. A brief glance passed between Damien and Nico. Damien nodded. Done. Elena stepped closer. You do not move me, lock me away, or make decisions about my life without speaking to me first. His eyes held hers. Agreed. And you follow the recovery plan. One eyebrow lifted. That sounds less like a condition and more like a threat. Breakfast at 7. Lunch at noon. Dinner before 8. No skipping meals because a shipping report looks important. A faint smile finally reached his face. You negotiate aggressively. You hired the wrong woman if you wanted quiet agreement. Damien extended his hand, but Elena did not take it yet. There is one more condition. He waited. Whatever happens between us cannot be payment for saving your life. I will not be treated like a debt you must repay. The humor left his expression, replaced by something steadier. You are not a debt. Then what am I? Damien looked toward the dining room where the council had watched her dismantle an entire conspiracy. The person I trust most in this house. Elena searched his face for possession, obligation, or the cold calculation he used with everyone else. She found none. That is a beginning, she decided, placing her hand in his. 3 months later, the Moretti dining room had changed. The council gathered beneath the restored chandelier, but Elena no longer stood behind a serving cart. A place had been set for her at Damien's right, marked with a brass nameplate that read Director of Household Security and Nutrition. Laurent now consulted her before altering menus. New employees received food safety training before entering the kitchen. Celeste, after cooperating fully with investigators and admitting the pressure placed on her family, had been allowed to leave under protection rather than disappear into silence. Victor and Marco faced public charges supported by records the council could no longer deny. Elena had also returned to culinary school, completing the program she once abandoned. When Damien offered to fund the entire institution, she stared at him until he reconsidered. He settled for driving her to evening classes twice a week and waiting outside with work he pretended not to mind. On the morning of her final exam, she found him at the breakfast table reading port reports beside an untouched plate. Elena placed one hand over the papers. What did we agree? Damien looked at the eggs, then at her. The Rotterdam shipment arrives in 2 hours. The eggs will become rubber in 2 minutes. Around the table, powerful men suddenly found their coffee fascinating. Damien set the report aside and picked up his fork. Elena sat beside him rather than returning to the kitchen. He took a bite, then another, without hesitation and without anyone testing the plate first. Trust had replaced fear so gradually that neither of them could name the exact day it happened. Damien reached across the table and turned her hand palm up. Stay for dinner tonight. Elena laced her fingers through his. Only if you finish breakfast. The man who once commanded the room with a glance looked down at his plate and obeyed. Yes, Ms. Morales.